Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutrabhashya Krutau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah. Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye. Chaitanyam Sarvagam Sarvam Sarvabhuta Guhashayam Yat Sarva Vishayatitam Tasmai Sarva Vide Namaha. Anavasthantaratvacha Bandho Natmani Vidyate Nashuddhischapya Sangatvat Asango Hiti Chashrutehe Sukshmika Gocharebhyascha Nalipyata iti shrutehe Evam tarihina mokshosti Bandha bhavat kathanchana. Anavasthantaratvacha Nasti avasthantaram yasya anavasthantara. Meaning Atma is one that is free from avasthantara, does not get transformed into another avasthantara state. Tatha Atma kutastatvat, because kutastha changeless and therefore avasthantara, change of state, of the form of one state to the other, like the milk turning to curd. That kind of avasthantara is not there in Atma. Kutastatvat. Therefore, bandho atmani vidyate. Atma is kutastha, changeless, nitya, asanga, ever free, and therefore there cannot be bondage in Atma such as that. Na shuddhischa, nor can there be a shuddhi or impurity in Atma, asangatvad, because even though Atma may be pure by himself, it may be contaminated by coming in contact, but nothing can come in contact with Atma because asanga, it transcends everything. It is everywhere and still remains totally unaffected by, in spite of supporting everything, sustaining everything, and still remains untainted, unaffected by everything, therefore ever pure, not subject to becoming impure. Therefore, Bandho natmani vidyate. Atmani bandha na vidyate. In Atma, there cannot be bandha. Looking at the essential nature of Atma, which is changeless, kutastha, and ever pure. Itascha na atmana paramarthako bandha. For this further reason also, there cannot be, is really the real bondage, paramarthako bandha. The real bondage in Atma cannot be. Sukshmika gocharebhyascha sukshmatvat egatvat agocharatvat sukshmatvam manovag agamyatvam. Because Atma cannot be reached by the mind and the speech, is very subject. So nothing can reach itself. So that is what is meant by Isha in the Ishavasya Upanishad also, that Devatas could not overtake it, And so, therefore, how Devata in the speech, the mind, they cannot reach it, overtake it. It's already there. Meaning that it transcends everything. Egatvam, advitiyatvam. So neither speech or the mind or the objects of speech or mind have any reach to Atma, therefore they cannot contaminate Atma. Ekatvam, advitiya, there is no second thing again in fact. So even speech, mind, or the objects of speech and mind also do not become dvitiya or dvaita, because the self transcends everything. Therefore, there is nothing of the same essential reality as the self is. Akocharatvam, nirvisheshatvam, etebhi hetubhya, nitya shuddheva atma, atma is ever pure. Na lipyate iti shrutehe, Shruti also says, na lipyate, never gets tainted. Smriti also says, no palipyate, atma no palipyate. So the first half of the verse 58 is a statement of the Siddhanti, statement of the Vedanti. Evam Atmanah Nitya Shuddha Buddha Mukta Svabhavatam Sadhayato Vedantinah. In all your enthusiasm, you establish that Atma is Nitya, Shuddha, Buddha, Mukta. Meaning mukta, ever free. There is no bondage in Atma. Good, then. If there is no bondage, then there is no liberation also. There is no liberation of moksha, then there is no point in the Upadesha of Upanishads or Shastra, of which the sole top subject matter is moksha. So Upanishad moksha shastram, Bhagavad Gita is a moksha shastram. There is no bandham, no bondage, there is no moksha also. So what is the purpose served by these scriptures, which are expounding the moksha, liberation for Atma? Anarthakyam, they become redundant. Iti akshimanti purvadinah. So all the other fellows now, which have been refuted so far, all of them together have this contention to make, hey Vedantin, if there is no bondage, there is no liberation, and therefore the texts which are teaching liberation become redundant. Evam tahena mokshosti bandhabhavat kasanchana. Evam tarhi, in the manner which you explain, Atma nitya shuddha, bandhabhavat, there is no bondage, therefore there is no liberation also. Tadabhave abhavat, bandhabhave moksha bhavat, there is no bandha, there cannot be moksha. तथा च मोक्षोपायोपदेश शास्त्र अनर्थक्यमेव इति स्यात्. Shastra, Upanishad in particular, and Vedanta. Moksha, Upaya, Upadesha, Shastram. Shastra is the nature of the Upadesha. For what? Upaya. Means for moksha. Moksha, Upaya, Upadesha. Shastra teaches us what is Upaya, the means of moksha or liberation. If there is no bondage, then what is the relevance of this? So now this continues in the next verse also. The Purvapaksha begins from the second line of verse 58. Evam tarhina mokshosti bandhavavat kasanchana. Then, all right, we say there is no moksha also. Then the question comes in the next verse. Shastranarthakyameva syad na buddher bhrantirishyate bandho mokshascha tannashah sayokto nachanya sayokto nachanya. What is it? Sayokto nachanya tha. Shastra naskhyameva syat. The Purvapaksha continues. If there is no real bondage, then there is no real liberation. There is no point in saying, giving you the means of liberation, knowledge, etc. No, the answer is given, that's not right. Even though there is no real bondage in Atma, still Shastra has a purpose to serve. So, buddhe, bhranti, ishyate, bandha. Bandha, so after na you can put it comma. Buddhe, bhranti, ishyate, bandha. Bandha, buddhe, bhranti, ishyate. By Vedanta, bondage is accepted as the bhranti, the delusion or misconception of buddhi. Mokshasya tannashah. And therefore, bhrante nasha, all moksha is the removal of the Brahma. Sayatokta nachanyatha. So the Tika says, Uttaramahanna buddhe ityadina. Buddhe bhrantihi bandha ishyate iti anvaya. Buddhe bhranti ishyate bandha. Buddhe bhrantihi bandha ishyate. By Vedantin, what is bandha? The bondage is buddhe bhrantihi. Bhranti means, Brahma means aviveka. Seeing what is not there and failing to see what is. Seeing what is not there, seeing bondage in Atma which is not there, and failing to see the liberation which is there. This is Brahma. Or misperception, misapprehension, as Bada Swami used to say, about Atma. There is perception all right, but then there is a wrong, false judgment about what you are perceiving. Meaning that we are experiencing Atma, and we are always experiencing Atma ever free, because that's how Atma is, that's how I am. But my conclusion about myself, my judgment about myself, my opinion about myself is I am bound. So that I am bound is not the reality of Atma, but this is my judgment about what I am experiencing. My interpretation of what I am experiencing. Not that I am experiencing bondage of Atma. I am experiencing Atma also, And limitedness also, not bonded, limitedness. Where they are in two different locuses. Atma is of the nature of a subject, limitedness is of the nature of object. They don't enjoy the samadhikaranyam. I put them in the same adhikarana, same locus, and say Atma is limited. This is not my experience. That is my judgment, my conclusion, my opinion that I am limited. People say I am experiencing samsara, you are not experiencing. I am experiencing limitedness, you are not experiencing, you are concluding. If you are experiencing limitedness, then that's the reality, then nothing can be done about it. If limitedness was my nature, I would not have any problem with that also, because I would gladly accept myself. The fact that my basic problem is I cannot accept myself because I perceive myself to be quite contrary to what I am. Because limited, being free, ever free is my nature. So that's my expectation of myself, that I should be free. I have concluded that I am bound for whatever reason. Therefore, I find myself quite contrary to what I expect myself to be. So not only moksha or freedom is my nature, there is also an expectation that I should be free or I should be liberated, mukta. My expectation of myself is in keeping with my nature. So it's a very fair expectation that I should be happy, I should be free, I should be independent, I should be fearless. These are my expectation of myself. They are fair expectations because they are in keeping with what my true nature is, but I conclude by wrongly. So on one hand, I expect myself to be free, and then I conclude that I am bound. So that is the source of all the conflict within myself. That's called samsara. That very conflict of disappointment with myself. And when I expect myself to be liberated, free, then many other and ever pure, I expect. So impurities, and I cannot tolerate myself. I expect myself to be right always, satyam, knowledgeable, jnanam, anantam, happy. I find myself to be quite different from that. Therefore, I become the primary source of my disappointment with myself, and therefore with everything else. That's what Vedanta calls samsara. The rope snake is samsara, fear caused by the rope snake. There is no such entity as rope snake. But a bhranti can create the same feelings or same sentiment as a real snake may create. In me also the bhranti of the bondage, the misperception that I am bound creates the same kind of feeling, sorrow, sadness as it would have been created had I been really bound. So everybody else takes the bondage to be real. So therefore they teach you what's the real way of becoming free from that, which is karma. If something has to be changed, then you have to do something. So karma, upasana, all this will be primary teaching of all those who accept bondage as real. Not that karma, upasana, not taught by Vedanta, they are taught but for a reason, as a preparation of knowledge. And they teach them as a means of liberation. Anyway, thus Vedantin says that Ashochan anvasochastvam, there is no cause for shoka or grief at all, other than my own false perception of myself. And the way I try to solve the problem of grief is I try to rearrange the things around me, leaving myself intact, leaving my conclusion about myself, leaving them intact, I try to rearrange them, but my conclusion of myself doesn't change. By rearranging things around myself, hoping that the world will be convenient to me, agreeable to me, favorable to me, the world becomes favorable to me, still my opinion of myself doesn't change. There may be momentary respite, but then that opinion comes back. Tannasho bhrantinasho moksheti jishate na paramarthatah. Vedanta does not say that the Atma in reality becomes liberated. Moksha is defined as the bhrantinasha, the elimination of bhranti, of misconception, of viveka. Sabandha Yatha Ukta, Sa Yatha Ukta, the verse says. Sa Yatha Ukta, we already said this earlier. Ajnanam kalpanamulam samsarasya niyamakam. That's the verse 16, 17 of same chapter. Go back to verse 17. Here, page 250. Ajnanam kalpanamulam samsarasya niyamakam. Niyamakam means the cause. Samsarasya niyamakam nimittam. The ajnanam kalpanamulam. Ajnanam is the mula of kalpana, of superimposition. And that is the cause of samsara. So we already said this, that the author himself says, Tan sayatha uktaha bandha mokshasya. So bhranti bandha mokshasya tannasha. Tannasha bhrantinasha. Sayatha uktaha, reminding us that we have already said it, pura mukta, ajnanam, kalpanamulam, samsarasya, nyamakam, iti tathaiva. Nacha anyatha. The bondage and the liberation are exactly as we explained earlier and no different from that. So Tikakara concludes, Tathacha ajnana kalpita bandha brahma nivrityarthatvat UpadeshSahastrasya Tathacha. And therefore, UpadeshSahastrasya, the Upadesha Shastra, Vedanta Shastra, or Moksha UpadeshSahastrasya, the Vedanta Shastra, that teaches moksha or moksha upaya. Ajnana kalpita bandha brahma nivrityarthatvat. The purpose of Vedantic teaching is to remove the bandha of the nature of Brahma, born of ignorance. So there is ignorance in life. And there is notion of bondage in life, Vedanta says. Notion can create the same effect in me as though the bondage is real. So as long as notion is not known as notion, I take it as real. And Shastra is meaningful because they teach the means of removal of Brahma or notion, born of ignorance, by imparting knowledge. Now continuing, Ajnana Mula Buddhi Dharma Dhyasa Lakshana Bandha Chidatmani Yuktam. Again they said, Ajnanam Kalpana Mulam Samsarasa Niyamakam. So Buddhe Bhranti Bandha Ishyate Mokshasya Tannasha Bhrantinasha. He said, Ajnana Mula Buddhi Dharma Dhyasa Lakshana. Ajnana Mula Buddhi Dharma Dhyasa. Buddhi Dharma Dhyasa. Buddhi Dharma, superimposing Buddhi Dharma. So, superimposing Dharma, the attributes of Buddhi upon Atma. Nature, all limitations belong to buddhi, and kartrutva, bhoktrutva all belong to buddhi. That's quite right, it has to be there, then only vyavahara is possible. So buddhi is what it is supposed to be. So it should be. Atma is what it is supposed to be. Except that buddhi dharma adhyasa lakshana. Adhyasa buddhi dharma the kartrutva bhoktrutva buddhi are superimposed upon the Atma. What's the cause of it? Majnana moolam. Because of not knowing the essential nature of Atma, the Anatma is taken to be Atma buddhi. And therefore, the limitations of buddhi are thought to be limitations of Atma. Bandha, this is called bondage, notional. Chidatmani, in Chidatma, in the self there is consciousness, bondage is only of the nature of this notion. Because of ignorance, of the nature of superimposing the nature of buddhi upon Atma, and then super Atma upon buddhi also, because taking buddhi as Atma, and limitation of buddhi is limitation of Atma. So next verse is Bodhatma Jyotisha Deepta Bodhamatmani Manyate Buddhirnanyosti Bodheti Seyam Bhrantir Hidhigata. Bodhatma Jyotisha Deepta. Anvaya comes to the next line, Buddhi. I say, what is Deepta? Bodham, So, that doesn't get connected. Then you see second line, Bodhatma Jyotisha Deepta Buddhi. That's how Anvaya is. Buddhi is feminine. Deepta, illumined by Bodhatma Jyotisha, by the light of consciousness of the self. The Buddhi or the intellect is illumined. That's the method of explaining is that Atma gets reflected in Buddhi. That's the reflection of Chidavasan, so the Buddhi is enlivened. So Buddhi is enlivened and therefore Buddhi becomes lighted as though and illumines his own objects. So Buddhi becomes lighted and thing, therefore Buddhi is taken to be Atma because Buddhi is as though Chetana. The consciousness of self is as though infused into the buddhi and therefore, like the magnet, makes these iron filings also active. Similarly also Atma, in presence of Atma, the buddhi becomes enlivened. There is a nature of that combination. But not recognizing that enlivenment of the buddhi is not inherent to buddhi. It is because of the proximity of the self. Therefore, we take the enlivenment, consciousness as the nature of buddhi. And so, buddhi is taken to be Atma, and limitedness of buddhi is again taken the limitation of Atma. Bandha, so twofold anyonya adhyasa is there. The consciousness that is Atma is superimposed on buddhi, so buddhi is taken to be conscious entity. And the dharma, the attributes of buddhi are superimposed on Atma, that Atma is taken as karta bhokta. Idyuktam, which has been said. Buddhe, bhrandishyate, bandha, it is already said. Upapadayati, now how does it happen? How does the bhranti arise? How does it arise? So that is stated in this verse, Bodhatma Jyotisha Deepta Buddhi. Bodhatma Jyotisha Deepta Bodh Rupasya Atmana. So Atma, who is of the nature of Bodha or consciousness. So Jyotisha, Atma is a Jyotish or the light of the nature of consciousness. Jyoti Prakasha. But Atma Jyotisha Deepta Buddhi. Buddhi or the intellect, that is Deepta, illumined or enlivened by Atma Jyoti, by the Jyoti or the light of consciousness. But light of consciousness does not directly illumine the Buddhi. Because Buddhi enjoys a reality different from that of Atma. Therefore, the explanation is that Atma gets reflected in the Buddhi, that reflection called Chidavasa. Chidavasa enjoys the same degree of reality as Buddhi, therefore Chidavasa can illumine the sun by getting reflected in water, enlivens the water. So similarly, Atma as though gets reflected in the Buddhi, called Chidavasa, the reflection, Chidavasa, that enlivens the Buddhi. So Atma Jyoti is Chidavasa. Not the Jyoti of consciousness, but the consciousness reflected in Buddhi. Tena Deepta, Vyapta, Prakashita Buddhi, Atma Bodhatma Jyotisha Deepta Buddhi. By this light of consciousness, meaning by the Chidavasa, by the reflected consciousness, Deepta, Vyapta, Prakashita Buddhi. The Chidavasa pervades the Buddhi, enlivens the Buddhi, makes the Buddhi of the nature of illumination. Like the water also becomes lighted up because of the reflection of sun. That Buddhi, Bodham Atmani Manyate. Atmani Swasyam Bodham Chaitanya Manyante. Buddhi thinks that I am consciousness, I am Atma. Not only that, Nanyosti Buddhayati, and there is no Buddha, the Sakshi or no other than me. So Buddhi that enjoys the reflection of consciousness, therefore as though becomes conscious. Not that Buddhi becomes conscious, but as though becomes conscious. And since consciousness is Atma, Buddhi, I am the Atma. I am the witness, I am the illuminator, there is nobody other than me, no Atma other than me. Ahameva Buddhayati Savasa Buddhi Prakashate. Savasa Avasena Saita Buddhi. Chidavasena. Buddhi, along with the Chidavasa, thinks that Ahameva Buddha, I am the Buddha, I am the knower, I am the Atma. Sa iyam bhranti dhigata. This bhranti, for Buddhi thinks that I am the Atma, is dhigata, is in the Buddhi, not in the Atma. So that is where the bhranti has to be removed. Tadavekat hameva baddha karta ityadi atmani samsara. If Buddhi is Atma, then Buddhi is limited definitely. Limited by the upadhi in which the Buddhi is. So Buddhi is limited, therefore Buddhi thinks I am limited, I am bound, I am karta bhokta. So therefore all those notions are thought to be the notions or the attributes of Atma. Samsara dhigata bhranti eva. Important is not Atmagata bhranti, not Atmagata, dhigata. All this bhranti is all in the Buddhi, and therefore it can be removed from Buddhi, that's all. Buddhiyam bodhatmatvam yatha pratiti paramartham kim na syat. Why do you say that the consciousness that we find in the Buddhi, you say that it is a notion on the part of Buddhi that I am conscious? Why not Buddhi be conscious anyway? Buddhe bodhatmatvam yatha pratiti, yatha pratiti, as perceived. What? Bodhatmatvam, as perceived, as thought that I am the Bodhatma, I am the consciousness. Why not? Paramartham kim nasyat. Why not buddhi be consciousness? Why not buddhi be atma? Why do you think it's notion? If that's the question, na itya bodhasyati. So this doubt is replied in next verse. Bodhasyatma swarupatvat nityam tatropachariyate avekopyanadyoyam samsaro nanya ishyate. Bodhasya atma swarupatvat. Buddhi is not Bodha Swarupa. Bodha, consciousness, is not Buddhi Swarupam, is not the nature of Buddhi. Atma Swarupatvat, because Bodha, consciousness, is the essential nature of Atma. How do you say that? That it is not the consciousness, is not the nature of Buddhi, but it is the nature of Atma. How do you make that statement? From our experience, says, Buddhe agantukatvena bodha vyavicharat. Bodha vyavicharat. This vyatireka is there, vyavichara is there. That bodha is there, buddhi is not there. It is called swarupa, essential nature, when the heat can never be with fire, without the fire, and vice versa. So when there is always an accompaniment, then only we say this is essential nature. Buddhi does not always accompany Atma. Sushupte Atmana Sadbhavat. In Sushupti, consciousness is very much there. At that time, consciousness eliminates the absence of everything. In waking and dream states, the consciousness eliminates the presence of the gross and subtle worlds. In deep sleep state, it eliminates the absence, so therefore we know, I didn't know anything. To say that I don't see anything also you need to see. Mama, I don't see anything. It's dark. For you to say I don't see anything, you must be seeing. So also for the self to say that I do not know anything in the deep sleep state, the kinchit avedisham, I did not know anything. For that knowing has to be there. Na drushte, na drashtuhu drushte viparilopo vidyate. Drashtuhu drushte. The drishti of the drashta can never suffer a cessation. And so Bodha is there all the time. Buddhi comes and goes. So Buddhe agantukatvena vyavicharat. There is separation between Bodha and the Buddhi. Then waking and deep sleep, Bodha and Buddhi are together, but in the deep sleep, Bodha and waking and dream they are together. In the deep sleep it's not. So Buddhi is not present in deep sleep, and then agantuka comes manifest in the dream and the waking. Bodha, whereas Bodha is in all the three states, therefore, Bodha sacha vinapi buddhi buddhim sushupte sadbhavat. Bodha, see, this is the way they write Sanskrit. Bodha sacha vinapi, not bodhasya vina. Buddhim vinapi. See, this vina, it governs second and third case, not sixth case. Bodhasya, vina cannot go with Bodha, understand? Vina can only go with buddhi, buddhim vinapi, bodhasya, sushupte sadbhava. That's how the prose order is. But since they can take the liberty with Sanskrit because you can always connect the Anvaya, the prose order can be precise because of the vibhaktis. So buddhim vinapi sushupte bodhasya sadbhava. In Sushupti, Bodha, the consciousness is present, very much present, even without the buddhi. Therefore, again, Atma Surupatvat means again connects with Bodha. Bodhasya Atma, so Bodhasya Sushupti Sadbhavat, Bodhasya Atma Swarupatva. Since Bodha is present very much in deep sleep state also, so Bodha always accompanies Atma. Therefore Bodha is the consciousness, the essential nature of Atma. Then why do we say that I am the buddhi is I am ahankara? Tatra buddhau sa upacharyate. That the conclusion that the buddhi is consciousness, ahankara is consciousness, I, the limited I is consciousness, upacharyate is only in a secondary sense. Adhyasya vyavakriyate, it is just vyavahara, it is a notion arising out of adhyasa. Avivekadityartha. It is never consciousness buddhi. Upacharyate, it's only in a secondary sense, avivekad, because of my failure to recognize. The consciousness is one location, buddhi is in a different location. So not recognizing this vyadhikaranam of the buddhi and atma, this samadhikaranyam, I place them in the same locus. It's called aviveka. Therefore, adhyasya vyavakriyate. Because of adhyasa, vyavahara, shabda prayoga, that buddhi is atma, buddhi is consciousness. Just because you say it doesn't mean it becomes that way, because logically it doesn't make sense. Therefore, it is only adhyasa. Tari saha vivekaha sadi anadirvayate vikshayam. When did this begin? Swami, when did this begin? Since when have I been saying that I am buddhi, I am ahankara? When did it begin? Aviveka has a beginning, then avidya also will have a beginning. So avivekopi anadyayam samsara, avivekopi anadihi, therefore anadyayam samsara. Aviveka also is anadi. And therefore, yadi aviveka eva anadi ajnana kritatvat anadihi, tarhi tasyeva. So, since anadi ajnana kritatvat, on account of being the effect or product of the ignorance which is anadi, beginningless, aviveka eva, aviveka also itself the product of the ignorance which is beginningless, therefore anadi. Aviveka eva anadi. Aviveka anadi, that statement says aviveka is beginningless. Why? Anadi ajnana kritatvat. Because it is a result of the ajnana, which is ignorance, beginningless. Therefore, aviveka also is beginningless. Tari tasyeva brahmatma jnana nivritti syat. All right. In that case, by viveka jnanam, aviveka gets removed. The aviveka and buddhi, that I am atma, and that aviveka is the product ignorance that is beginningless, then by saying that you are Brahman, aviveka will go. The samsara nivritti, how will samsara go? By saying that this is rope, the snake will go. But how will fear go? So, snake is not our problem, fear is the problem. That's called samsara. That's how snake becomes a problem. Snake is not the problem, reality given to snake is the problem, understand? Later on, once you know there is rope, and even if it appears as snake because of some optical reasons, there is no fear going to be there. So perception is not the problem as much as the conclusion derived from that perception and interpretation of the perception. So just a question, that Brahma Atma Jnana, that Atma is Brahma, but that knowledge, the aviveka that I am ahankar, that will go. So by viveka jnanam, aviveka will go. So therefore the Upanishad teaches us viveka jnanam, that you are Brahma, not a jiva. Alright, so aviveka will go. How will samsara go? samsara nanya ishyate. There is no samsara other than aviveka. Kartradi dharmaka buddhi aviveka samsara ityartha. Kartradi dharmaka buddhi. Buddhi that possesses dharma of kartradi, kartru, bhoktru, etc. So that aviveka. Kartrutva is not a problem. Understand, kartrutva, bhoktrutva are not problem. As long as kartrutva, bhoktrutva are recognized to belong to buddhi, I have no problem. Nothing is a problem. When I gets connected, then it becomes a problem. And only then it becomes solution also. That is why Brahma should get connected to the I. It's not enough that, Ananda should get connected to the I. Then only it is a solution. A given thing becomes problem when it gets connected to the I. And other thing becomes solution when it gets connected to the I. Kartrari dharmaka buddhi aviveka. Aviveka, non-discrimination, superimposition of the buddhi in the Atma. The buddhi possessed of the dharma of kartrutva, etc., taking every dharma of the Atma, that is samsara. Nothing more than that. That is enough to cause all the grief anyway. The perception of snake is samsara, but then the fear, etc., will have natural consequences. So this is called moha, and shoka is the natural consequence of moha. So shoka moha lakshana samsara. Says Bhashyakara. This moha is there, aviveka is there, that I am limited, I am Arjuna, I am karta, bhokta, there will be hurt and guilt, and that's what causes the samsara. That causes the grief. Bandhasya ajnanatmakatve phalitamaha. If bondage is purely a product of ignorance, ajnanatmakatva means what? Of the nature of ajnana. Bondage is purely of the nature of ignorance. Phalitamaha, this is what is established now. There is no real bondage, only ignorance. And aviveka is a bondage. When that is established, then phalitam. So then what does it amount to? The next verse is mokshastannasha eva syad nanyatha anupapattitah yesham vastvantara pattihi moksho nashastu tairmatah. Moksha tannasha eva syat. Therefore, moksha avivekanasha. Moksha is the elimination of aviveka or notion of bondage. Nanyatha. There is no other thing. Moksha does not mean anything else other than the removal of Bhranti or removal of the notion. Very simple explanation by Vedanta. Very simple and therefore simple to accomplish. So we'll see. Then, Jnana, the Jnana Nivritya, Tat Karya, Bandha Nivritti Eva Mukti. Because Bandhasya Jnanatmakatve, Bandha is nothing but ignorance. Therefore, Jnana, the Jnana Nivritya. When ignorance is dispelled by knowledge, Tat Karya Bandha Nivritti. When the snake goes away or snake is falsified, the fear, etc., born of snake are also falsified. So also the kartrutva, bhoktrutva are falsified, then the hurt and guilt born of them are also falsified. Tat karya bandha nivritti. Ajnana nivritya, when the ignorance is dispelled, the bondage, the false alarms, the false fear, etc., brought about by that also gets dispelled. That's called mukti. Na anyatha. Nothing else happens. No happening here. He yasya upadesya va mokshasya anupatti. Moksha does not mean that something is given up. Heyam. Moksha does not mean something is acquired. Upadayam. So no vyavahara takes place, no experience takes place of giving up something, bondage is given up. Or moksha upadaya, the liberation is acquired. That bondage is given up, liberation is acquired. No such thing is there. If something is there, then you have to think about it. Moment there is a feeling that I become liberated, then think about it. I got liberated at 4 o'clock afternoon on Friday, on Saturday day. Now then wait a minute. That means that you are bound until then. That means the bondage was real. Then that thing can come back. Nanyatha. He has said, not that the bondage is given up. Upada is not that the liberation is acquired. So, anupatti, anupattita, anupattehe, there is no acquiring, no giving up, no change, no transformation, nothing as far as moksha is concerned. Just being what you are. Recognize that you are always liberated. Recognition is moksha. Not that I am liberated. That I was always liberated. Absolutely no change has happened in me. Therefore, change can be the nature of giving up or acquiring something. Nothing has happened. Anupattimeva dhrudayan pakshantaram nirakaroti. So there is no change. No heyatvam, no upadayatvam, nothing giving up, nothing acquiring. I don't get that feeling at all in liberation. So that untenability of happening, that moksha is not happening. But Puja Swami is not an experience. It is recognition of what is. It's not happening. It's just being what you are. So all of that, if this is clear to us, then the moksha sadhanam becomes clear. We are always looking for something to happen. Something to recognize rather than something to happen. Something to be rather than something to become. Pakshantaram nirakaroti. How other paksha is not tenable. So therefore the verse is second line. So first line is explained, moksha tannasheva syat, bhranti nasheva moksha syat, anyatha. No other way moksha can be explained as something acquired, something given up, not happening. But then some people say that, yesham vastvantarapatti. People say that jiva becomes Brahman. Vastvantara. One vastu becomes another vastu. So yesham vadyanam swarupad anya vastvan. There is a transformation in you. What is the point of liberation? You are not changed at all. You get transformed from being bound to liberated. So that's called vastvantara. Anyad vastu. You are something, become something else. That is called the moksha. Yesham vadyanam swarupad anya vastvantarapatti. That swarupa undergets, chose that jiva is swarupa, by swarupa jiva. And by swarupa becomes Brahman. Meaning that there is a real change in the jiva-atma, his essential nature changes, that is called, otherwise you will remain bound if you don't change. Change is very much required where it is possible, that's in the mind, by the way. Yes, all change is required. All change or transformation is required in the mind, which must become free from the rajas and tamas and become sattvic. All that is accepted. Let's go. But then, not the change in Atma. So, Swarupat, Anyavastvantarapati, Atmoksheti Matam, Yesham Vadyanam. Those Vadis, those disputants, that's how they translate, think that Atma undergoes a change and thus becomes liberated. Now, what will happen? Moksho nashastu tair matah. See, this opinion amounts to nasha or destruction of Atma. Because a thing cannot change its nature, it cannot become something else. Become something else, what became does not remain. A becomes B, then A doesn't remain, and B is there. Or B doesn't remain, A is not, A alone is there. If one thing becomes other, then Atmanasya moksha iti ishtasya. It would amount to saying that Atma has now disappeared. Because Atma has become Brahma, so there is no Atma anymore. Sthitasya ishtasya va anyasya anyatva sambhavat. Atma remains Atma, then cannot be Brahman. Atma becomes Brahman, then there is no Atma. See, if you look at the very verse 1, 15:1, here page 218 in my book. But if you look at verse 15:1, Nanyat anyat bhaved, it started that way. Anyat anyat na bhaved. One thing cannot become something else. Tatha tadeva. Brahma anya jiva rupam vastu nashtam sat. If jiva becomes destroyed, then Brahman is there is no jiva to enjoy the benefit. Jiva remains jiva, there is no Brahman, there is no becoming. Brahma yasan Brahma peri. One is Brahman alone becomes Brahman. That's what Upanishad says. So coming back here, that part. So thus if they think that a transformation takes place, if milk becomes curd, then there is no milk now. Then it's curd. Doesn't become, either it is milk is gone, then milk has no benefit of enjoying the state of curd then, because no more there. The Atmanasha eva moksha. Amount of saying that Atma is no more there, that is called liberation. Sthitasya nashtasya va anyasya anyatva sambhavat. Sthitasya. If A remains A, then also there is no becoming B. If A doesn't remain A and B alone is there, then also the A has not become B. Asambhavat. Therefore, A cannot become B. A can recognize that I am A, thinking that I was B. Recognize that I am A. That can happen. It should happen. Vastvantarapati sabai prapti vivakshate. No, it's not that he becomes Brahman. He goes to Brahma Loka. Vastvantarapati prapti vivakshate. That you attain a loka, like you attain Brahma Loka. That is called a moksha. Brahma Loka is then explained as Vaikuntha, etc. But it's basically Brahma Loka, which the Upanishads talk about. Tathapi sanyogaha viprayogantaha. Sanyogaha viprayogantaha. All associations result into disassociation. It's the rule. Why is that a rule? Because there was some reason for the association. Two entities got associated for a reason. If that reason which bound them no more remains, then they will be separated. And the bondage cannot be permanent because it happened. The bondage into independent entities happened for some reason, and which happens also will unhappen. Therefore, sanyoga viprayogantaha. All sanyoga, all associations will result into disassociation. Iti nyayana krutakasya anityatva vyaptescha. One, that if you reach some place, then you will have to come back from there, number one. And krutakasya anityatva vyaptescha. Because reaching there, moksha is a result of karma. By going some place. is going to be anitya. So two things. When you go there, you will come back. Secondly, because going is a result, is action, result of action there, but it is impermanent. Anitya moksha syat. So any kalpana about moksha, any happening about, any kalpana of happening of moksha will make moksha anitya. Because any happening is anitya. So moksha cannot be happening, cannot be transformation, cannot be a change, cannot be reaching somewhere. It's just recognition of what is. That's called knowledge. So that's how the arguments go. We'll continue. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Krutau Vande Bhagavantau Ishvaro Gururatmedi Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.